Hi guys, today we're in the EPI shop. We're going to show you how to work on the clutches on a 900 and 1000 RZR. This machine right here is a 2015 1000 RZR, but the 900,000s are pretty much the same process of how to do it. Pretty much we got to start up by jacking up the rear end of the machine. Make sure you do it nice and safe so nothing's going to tip over. You don't have to go way up in there, just enough to get the weight off the tires. Once you do that, on this one, we already loosened it up. We kind of, to speed it up, we've taken some of the stuff loose just to help show you the process. But sometimes you might have to lift up on the tire and bounce it up and down. Pull the bolt out, and that'll make your shock go loose. And then sometimes what we found is you might need to jack it up a couple more pumps just to get a little more leverage. But this one come out. So what I do is I just lift it up and out of the way, and then move it over there. You gotta be careful you don't damage the hose or anything up here. 900, you can either take the top shock off or move it around. You don't have to take the whole shock out, you just got to loosen up and move it around so you get clearance to the clutches. Once you got that done, on the 2015 it has this vent here. On the 14,000s and the 900s you won't have this extra vent hose, but virtually all you got to do is there's a bolt that holds this clamp up here. Just remove that out, and there's a hose clamp here. This is loose, and you just slide it off, and you can push this up and out of the way. And then you'll have your clutch cover bolts. You have 8-10 clutch cover bolts all the way around the machine. On this one, it's an 8mm socket. Just take them out, loosen them up, pull it off. The only thing to watch there is when you do take it apart, there's a little foam gasket in here all the way around. 99% of the time it's going to stay there and not have any issues. But just watch for it so you don't wreck it or tear it. And then once you get that out, that'll expose the clutches. This is going to be your primary clutch or drive clutch on your motor. This is going to be your secondary clutch or driven clutch on the transmission. And we'll go through and show you how to take it apart. Alright, so the first thing you want to do, you don't have to if you're pulling the primary clutch, but if you need to loosen up the belt or change the belt, what you use is, this tool should be in your toolkit in your machine. This end is actually made for adjusting your shocks, and then this end will work in there. If you don't have this, you can use a big screwdriver or something. You just got to be careful you don't damage this little plastic roller right here. But what you do is you just put that in there like that, and then open it up. And what it does is it opens up the clutch and lets the belt drop down and loosens it so there's more slack to work with. If you need to open it up farther than that, once the belt is in there, you can take a bigger screwdriver and just kind of force it open and it'll go farther. We're taking off both clutches, so we don't need to do that now, but just a quick, easy way to loosen the belt when you're changing belts or taking them on and off. We'll show you how we install them too. But from there, to pull the primary clutch off, to do like a clutch kit, what you're going to need is a small bar, something like this. And what we'll do is you stick it through here, and you want to make sure you're on the outside edge of these towers. You don't want to go in between here because there's a little plastic button that rides up and down. You can damage that, and then it'll wreck the plastic button. If you put a little scratch or bump or anything in there, it just wears out that plastic. Okay, so we got the bar in here, and this is basically to keep the clutch from rotating. That way you can undo the bolt out of there. Standard right hand thread on this machine. So what we do is the belt's in there, or the bar's in there, and I let it rest on this frame mount here. Just be careful that you're not going to catch a electrical wire or pinch something off that you don't want to, and then be able to turn it out. And you normally want to do this by hand. You don't want to use the impact because this is right on the crankshaft of the motor. So even in the Polaris factory service manual, it'll tell you don't use impact wrenches on them. So basically, you got to work this bolt out. Once that comes out, there's a couple little washers. Make sure you got all those. And then this is our clutch puller, primary clutch puller. This one's a part number PCP8 for the 900 and 1000s. It basically threads in the clutch, butts up against the crankshaft, and pulls it off. So what you need to do is, again, leave your bar in there, but the clutch is going to turn the opposite direction. Thread this in there just like you're going to tighten up a bolt. And usually you want a breaker bar on this, but you just tighten it up, and as you tighten it, you'll just have to hold this bar in place so it doesn't let the clutch rotate. And sometimes this will pop right off, and sometimes you got to go really hard and it'll make a big loud bang when it comes, but it'll usually come off. There, as tight as this goes, all of a sudden lets loose. If for some reason, if you're really cranking out really super hard and it's not coming, what you want to do is stop and just take a real light hammer and just kind of hit it square on the end, and usually that's enough vibration to pop it off. If it doesn't come off from there, give us a call and we can give you some other ideas to help it. Usually you don't have to go that drastic with it. Then all you got to do, pull your bar out. That should be loose. So just unthread your clutch puller. And just pull it off. And we loosen the belt, so that makes that a lot easier process. And then just pull this off, set it aside, and make sure it's a nice clean thing. You don't want to get grease or anything else on any part of the clutch. And then we'll show you the rest of it. Alright, now we got the primary clutch off. Here's how to loosen up the secondary. You can do that. 900,000, usually pretty much the same. Sometimes these bolts come right out pretty easy, and you can spin them out. This one happens to be a 15mm socket you use. Sometimes you can hold them by hand. Let's see if I can do it here. From spinning it, and you can just loosen them up. This one we kind of broke loose just to show the video a little bit quicker. Otherwise, again, being careful you don't damage that. You can stick a screwdriver in here, and that'll help keep it from spinning and moving around. Or if you got a buddy there that can help you hold things, that's the easiest way to do it. But yeah, you just basically thread that out. This one's loose. Again, there's going to be a couple washers on the bolt. Just pay attention to whatever is on there and make sure you put it back in the right order and stuff. And then here's your spring or your belt and your clutch. Alright, so now we're going to show you how to take apart the secondary clutch. We've already taken these three bolts out. There's the torque head bolt. They might be Loctited from the factory. Sometimes they are, sometimes they aren't. So they're really hard to take out. It doesn't hurt to heat them up just a little bit. You don't always have to, but just good because they do strip out easy. But basically loosen these up. This is stock Helix in here now. And you might have to turn in one direction or other for it to come out, but it should kind of lift out. And then once you get it out, you'll see this. This is your Helix. And then that'll expose the snap ring here that we're going to have to remove, and then I'll show you the color of the springs and stuff in there. So then this is our clutch compression tool, the CCT510. Works good for primary and secondary clutches. You just basically slide this down in there. Alright, so one thing we want to do before we put the tool and the adapter on is I always like to make a magic marker here. And this just helps and helps you line up a lot easier and quicker. Usually a lot of times from the factory you'll see a little white mark on here. If there's no marks, you can just make your new ones. But what I try to do is line up the mark here and go all the way up on the shaft a ways. Because when you're trying to line this up, it's a spline. There's splines in there, so you have to get them lined up the same way to get them to go back down. So it's just easier and a lot quicker if you do that rather than taking it apart 14 times. So just do that, makes life easier for you. Then thread her on down. And then when you use the tool like this, you just want to make sure you turn it so you can get the snap ring pliers in there on the snap ring. And then you just got to tighten it down just enough to get the tension off the snap ring. And so that little bit is all you really need. Pull the snap ring off, just like that, and just let it come up slowly. The spring is under a lot of tension, so you just don't want to pull off that snap ring and let it go. Just, you know, use a tool like this to slowly let it come out of there. And you just unthread the nut. Once you get that out, you'll have your snap ring here, your clutch spring, your secondary clutch spring in there. These are the splines I'm talking about. There is a Boss spline in here. I don't know if the camera will pick it up, but it's right there. It's like a double wide spline, so it'll only go on one way. So that's why we like to mark it. And then your spring. This is one of our prototype springs that we're still testing with, so there's no color on it. Usually you'll see some type of color, or your stock one, or whatever's on there. Take the spring, make sure it seats flat into this cup here. Sometimes you might have to push on it and wiggle around a little bit, but it'll kind of pop into place. Once you get that part in, you can shove it back into the clutch. But before you do that, another good thing to do is set your parts down here and clean your clutches really good. So I have them all apart. And there's two things to do to clean them. You can open them up here, get your hands in there with no spring or anything. And what I like to do first, take an air hose and just blow it out real good. That gets all that extra dust and dirt and debris and stuff out of there. And then take it like a Scotch pad, and you want to start from the outside edge and just kind of go in to the center and then back and forth all the way around the clutches. Do that on both sides, and that'll take the shiny gloss off there, any belt glazing, anything like that for you. Once you do that, then you want to take a clean rag with some brake cleaner, spray the brake cleaner on the rag, and just wipe it all down. Once you do that, these clutches are pretty clean because we've been having them in and out quite a few times lately. But a lot of times it'll be really black and dark, so just keep doing it until you're good and clean. Then you're ready to go. We'll show you how to do that on the primary clutch also. But then it's just a matter of taking the clutch, putting her back together. Again, you want your spring, make sure the metal cup's on there. The metal cup goes down. And then you want to put this in there. And one other thing to inspect, sometimes on some of these, especially the thousands, are pretty good at breaking these. If this is cracked or broke, you want to replace that. Make sure your spring should kind of fit into there and seat into there. Make sure you put your snap ring on. And it's just a matter of tightening it back down. And one thing you want to check is, before you start putting a lot of tension on it, kind of line up, I don't know if you can see that, but there's my black line there, and then line that up on your line on your collar, and that'll help speed things up. And I don't know if you can see them in the video or not, but we'll get it close, and then we'll get it down there for you. Alright, so then just tighten this down. Alright, so once you get it close, you can kind of see the marks line up. You might not be able to, but they're down in there. And then you don't want to force it down. It should go down nice and easy. If you force it down, you can break that little spline piece in there or damage the clutch. And just crank it down. And again, it doesn't go a whole lot farther than what that snap ring spot is. Just put your snap ring on. And it's always a good idea just to put a little tension on there, but move your snap ring back and forth, that way you know it's fully seated, and then let it come back out. And the spring's installed. Then what you want to do is you want to install your Helix back in there. Now this is the stock Helix. Pretty much the biggest part about this is the shift angles here, and then this will be your engine braking notch, which comes stock on a lot of the 900 RZR 1000s. On our Helix, we do remove that notch so it doesn't lock up the tires and do as much engine braking as what the factory setup does. Just makes a lot more smoother acceleration and decel, and doesn't lock up the tires in there, loose sand, things like that, and save some belt life for you. So what you want to do is, depending on which Helix you go to, sometimes you might drop right in, Other times you might have to move them around a little bit to get the holes to line up. And basically you just line up this with the rollers, put it down in there. And this one actually happens to go right in, but sometimes you might be half a hole off, or half a turn off or something. So sometimes you just pick it up and turn it a little bit, you might be all right. Otherwise, what you might need to do is, if you got a screwdriver, just kind of pry down in there, but make sure you're going square on this plastic roller so you don't damage that, and turn it one direction or other, just enough to get it on. And then once we do that, it should seat fully down. Like there's a little bit of gap there. Once you get everything seated close, it should kind of pop down into place like that. And then what I like to do is put a little blue Loctite on these. You don't want to go red or green, just something blue, so it comes out easy if you need to for service and maintenance. But just put a little bit on there and then tighten them up. And then I just, before I tighten them all down, I get all four of them started and kind of seat them down at the same time. And then tighten those up and you're good to go with the secondary. One other thing on the Helix that we do get some questions on is your factory Helix will have an X on it here, and there's usually an X on the clutch. So usually if you're putting the factory stuff back in, you want to line those up. It's not 100% you have to, it's just kind of alignment marks. I've ran them both ways. I've taken them out and offset them, haven't seen any issues. But if you're running the stock one, line them up, just easier that way. On the EPI one, there's no X ones, or there's no X to mark anything, so you can put it in either way and you're good to go. As long as the EPI and OE Polaris ones, you should be fine with that. So. Alright, so now we got your primary clutch. We're going to service that real quick. What we'll do is we'll slide in the clutch compression tool here. And before we take anything apart, what you want to do is mark the clutch cover plate and put a couple X's on there so when you line it and when you clean stuff, you still have some alignment marks. It is important on the primary clutch to make sure you get them back together the same way, because they are balanced from the factory, so you don't want to screw that up and it runs right on your crankshaft. So slide it in there and then slide on the adapter here. And you don't have to go crazy on it, but you can tighten it down a little bit. And then just remove these. And what I like to do is I like to just fully take all these bolts all the way out. That way they don't bind up on you when you're taking the cover plate off. If you're doing this and you're not using a clutch compression tool, what you want is you want a buddy there to help you, or find a way to hold this down until you get all the bolts out so everything is held square, and then let it come up evenly. This tool does it nice and square, so you don't damage the bushing. I'll show you here in a second. This lets it come up nice and easy, straight. Take off the nut. Some springs will have more tension there than others. It'll depend on the brand and type of spring. But what will happen is that if you just unbolting this one at a time, you can, as one hole's tight, you'll cock this plate, and as it comes up, it'll damage the bushing. And there's a little bushing in here that it might be hard to tell and see. But if that's worn out, or if you damage that, it's going to wreck the operation of your clutch. So once that's off, all the tension's off the clutch. Put this offside, you pull out your spring, and it's just an Allen wrench on one end and a 3/8 on the other. You just pull this out, and then here's your weights. One thing you gotta watch on this, if you're taking apart an old one and you're trying to service and stuff, make sure your hole here isn't egged out and worn out. There's, on EPI weights, there'll be a plastic bushing in there. On some of the stock weights, it's all metal, there's no plastic, but either way, that hole should be good and round and tight to your bolt. So if it's something there, or if there's damage on the weight here where it's ground down or ground through, then you'll need to change that weight. For this setup, you basically repeat the same process for the other two weights. You put your new weight in there, stick it through the hole. One other thing is when you're always done, you want to make sure it pivots nice and free. And then just tighten this up. So that's tight. Before you put the spring back together, this is a good time. Take the clutch off. And then some models, this has a little blue washer here. So if you're cleaning out when the air hose blown out, tipping it upside down, make sure you don't lose that. It just protects the spring from hitting on the jam nut and stuff, or sometimes there's a spacer to limit the travel of the clutch and stuff. But just carefully don't lose that. But what you want to do is blow it out, the clutch. You'll see all kinds of belt dust in there. Lift it up, do the same type of thing. Also check your bearing on the razors. This should turn freely. It'll wiggle back and forth a little bit, but it should turn free. It won't spin like you won't spin it like a wheel and let it spin. But if that's hanging up or not turning at all, you're gonna need to replace that one Moe bearing. If that's good, the next thing to do, again, just like the secondary clutch, take and clean the clutch. Start on the outside edge. Keep going back and forth like this all the way around. You can use a Scotch-Brite, a real light sandpaper, a Brillo pad, something like that. You just don't want to put deep scars and scratches in there. You're just trying to buff off that shininess. And then when you're done, take some brake cleaner, spray it on a rag like this. Let's wipe it down. And just keep wiping it down until you end up with a clean rag and there's no more stuff on there. This one's pretty clean. We've had it apart several times. But just do that all the way around, and you're good to go. To put the clutch back together, slide it back down on the machine. Make sure you got your weights all in there. Grab whatever spring you want to put in. And then, again, make sure you don't damage this bushing. Just slide it down on there. And remember your alignment marks. And it's just a matter of tightening this down. Again, you don't want to put an impact on there and do it real hard and quick, because if you can damage that bushing when it comes down on the shaft of the clutch if everything's not lined up 100%. Just tightening them up, and then you'll see, move my hand so you can kind of see it line up down there. And you don't have to smash that all the way down. Even if it's this high, you can actually pick up that part of the clutch and move it to align it. And then just put your bolts in. I removed them with an impact just to speed things up for the video. But when you go to tighten these up, what you want to do is you don't want to super crank on them. You just tighten them up equally, just like you put on a wheel on a car. All the way around to balance it out, and repeat that for all the bolts. You'll be good to go. Alright, so now we'll show you how to install the secondary clutch back on. Basically take it, clean the shafts, clean the clutches all the way around, and then slide it back on there. Sometimes you might need to put the machine in a different gear, whether it's neutral or reverse forward, one way or another, to keep that shaft from spinning. Like right now it's free spinning. And that locks it here and lets it go on a lot easier. Then what you want to do is take your secondary clutch bolt, and on this particular machine it gets torqued to 40 foot-pounds. Each machine will vary, so just kind of check with your specs. If you buy in the EPI clutch kits, it'll give you all the torque specs for all these different bolts that we're taking apart on here. And for the speed of the video, we'll tell you to torque at 40 foot-pounds. Again, if you need to, you can stick a bar or screwdriver in here. Just make sure not to damage anything. Torque that down. Once that's torqued down, what I like to do is put the belt on there. And then this one is a stock Polaris belt right now. And what you want to do, and I should have told you this when we were taking it apart, but you always want to pay attention to how the belt comes off. It normally should be, so you can read, I don't know if you can read that or not, but the Polaris and then the part number, you want to make it so you can read it from left to right typically, and then put it on there that same way. If the belt was put on backwards by you or whoever else the last time, however the belt comes off, that's how you want to put it back on. If you're putting a brand new belt on, make sure you do it the right way. It's just easier to remember, and that way you know which, you can read your belt numbers and stuff, and makes life easier for you. On the 2015s, this gets a little bit tight in here. This cover will move and flex around a little bit, so it's a little bit harder on the 15s than it is some of the older 900s in the 2014,000. But you got to just kind of get your belt up in there, get around the clutch, and get it started kind of on there. Again, you got to make sure that you don't have grease or oil or anything else on the belt that's going to come into contact, because that's just going to make it slip. Once you get it started on there, if you have this tool, you can use this. Otherwise, again, screwdriver works really good. You just need to pull that in, and as you're doing that, just pull out this side, and that belt will fall down in there. And if you really want it down in there, grab a screwdriver, and that really goes. Once you got that done, put the primary clutch back on. One thing on the primary clutch is always a good idea to clean out this taper here, and also on your crankshaft, just take some brake cleaner again, wipe it down on a rag, clean it out, and put it back on. Put the clutch through the belt like that, slide it on there, make sure it's, try to slide on as straight as you can, and then it's just a matter of torquing, putting this clutch bolt in here. And then we just got to torque it down. On this particular machine, it's 95 foot-pounds. Alright, so what we're going to do is, again, just make sure that's in there. Make it so it's not going to catch anything. And make sure you're not going to damage anything on wherever the other end of your bar is going. And you can rest it on this bar, on the frame, or have somebody hold it, whatever works best for you. And then torque it to 95 foot-pounds. Once you got that, pull this out, you're good to go for that. And what I like to do is put the machine back in neutral. And what that allows you to do, that allows you to spin these clutches and resend the belt, because right now there's a lot of slack in here, and that way the first time you take off, it's not hard on the belt. So as you see, as I'm spinning, it's going to come out to the outside of the clutch here and stick out a little bit and tighten up that belt. Once you have that part done, you have both bolts torqued down, then it's just a matter of putting it all back together. You'll put your clutch cover bolts in. And again, these are going in plastic, so you got to be careful you don't strip them out. So kind of repeat that process, get them all in there. And then it's a matter of putting this back on. If it's a 2015, some of the other models again won't have this. Tighten up your hose clamp. You slide this up. There's a bolt that goes through there. That'll hold everything in place. Once you tighten that up, then it's just a matter of putting the shock back down in place. Again, sometimes you might have to lift this up or down, rock it back and forth a little bit. Make sure, one other thing I forgot to tell you when you take it apart, there's these little spacers in here, and they have rubber O-rings, one on each side. Make sure you don't lose those, and make sure when you put it back together that they're both in there. But then it's a matter of just kind of lining up that hole, and then you might have to wiggle the chassis up or down and lift the tire up or down one way or another. Once you get it in, it's just a matter of tightening up the nut, lowering it down. Just double check everything and go out and ride. Alright, one extra side note I forgot to mention on is on the 2015, we've never had this problem or seen this on the other older 900s and 1000 RZRs, but for some reason on the 2015, a lot of times when you put this together, whether you're just changing the belt or putting it on and off, putting our clutch kit in there or putting the stock stuff in and out, a lot of times when you bolt everything back together, you'll start up and it sounds like a really bad knocking noise. And it sounds 10 times worse than what it ever is. We've had this thing apart probably 60 different times. Every time we do it, for the first few times until you actually ride around, it'll do that. And usually it's just the clutch will rub on the cover or the belt might be hitting someplace. Usually once you ride it a little bit, it goes away. We've never had an issue where it's worn through or anything like that. Again, it doesn't matter what you're doing to it. It seems like whenever it has this cover off, it has to kind of self-realign itself. So just a heads up on that. If you have something apart and it sounds really nasty, that's probably what it is.